Hi there, my name is Denny, and welcome to a Dungeon Master Roundtable edition of the Speak Dicely podcast. I'm joined by some of my peers from the D&D YouTubeverse with the intention of asking them some questions about D&D and tabletop. But before we get to that, I'd like to give them the chance to introduce themselves and the channels that they come from.
Hi, I'm Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. I am on Facebook and Twitter. You might find me on Twitch TV, but I don't use it because I pretty much can't trust my players to say anything, anywhere, without getting me into trouble. So that's where you'll find me. And I talk about everything Dungeons and Dragons.
How's it going? No fun allowed. And I don't cause any trouble with my sort of videos. I cover the gambit of D&D, other tabletop role-playing games, and I cover modules and how to run the game.
I'm Steely. I do lore shorts and live streams of the D&D modules.
Thank you all for joining me here, and today's question that I've got for this group is, so DMs often wonder about how they can spice up their encounters, usually relating to combat encounters specifically. I personally like to consider adding a secondary objective or throwing in an event that happens in the middle of an encounter to cause some shift in the objective. Can you tell us about a memorable encounter or a story where there had been a secondary objective or something that changed everything in the encounter? Alternatively, do you have an idea for such an encounter? Steely, if you want to lead with this.
Okay, so the first one that comes to mind is whenever you give your party a weak NPC or they save an NPC that's overall helpless, and it becomes a task to save them from the bad guys. And I've got countless examples of this. The most recent one is my party got a hold of a giant snail. They traded for one. And they encountered some giant snakes that immediately went to the snail. And a party member went down. They were blowing consumables and resources just to save this snail from getting eaten by a snake. So that was, I love those objectives that just kind of sneak up like that. Protecting those helpless NPCs are my favorite.
Where the once joyous event is now part of the chore. Yeah, keeping NPCs protected is a great common use that we see in many games. Fred, what have you got?
Okay, so I've picked something. They were level 19. Yeah, played from level 1 to 20. And I didn't really, you can't really, there's nothing in the monster manual, there's nothing in any of the official books that you can throw at these guys at that particular point, which really taxes level 19 characters. And if you have a party of them, it's pretty brutal. So I built this monster. It's a Titan, and I gave it legendary actions. And one of those legendary actions is it could pretty much pump out about 100 points of damage with one blow. And no, I know that sounds terrible to people, but trust me, when characters are that higher level, they can cope. They'll be all right, okay? They've got like teleport and dimension door. They don't care about that sort of stuff. It was a shock to their system. What they did discover is that fighting the Titan was not the important thing. Because what I'd done is I'd set it up in such a way that the actual goal was not to engage the Titan. The Titan had too many hit points and did too much damage, and then even for them, they would have trouble dealing with it. And so they had about, I think it was about a round and a half or 2.5 rounds, somewhere in that. I can't remember. It's been a long time. And they had to get to this heart. It's a dragon heart, and destroying the dragon heart would have achieved the actual goal. Destroying that would actually bring down the structure. The Titan is just the guardian. You don't actually have to kill the guardian, you just need to complete the goal. So that's what they wound up doing. And then, of course, they bamfed out of there because being level 19, there's bound to be somebody who's got teleport and dimension door. Some of them might have been bleeding or on the verge of dying or already dead, but that's all right. You know, there's ways of coming back to life at level 19. So, yes, that's what I did. I think giving them an objective that they need to destroy in an encounter is actually a very good way of actually moving the battle away from just taking down hit points on something. And you can apply the same thing with, say, trebuchet or catapults, where they have to take out the structure of something rather than fight the entire army that's surrounding the catapults. And there's got to be a way of doing it right without engaging, thousands and thousands of troops. Yeah, there is. Make sure you're on a dragon flying and drop stuff on it. Not a problem. So yeah, those are my suggestions.
Yeah, those are it. I mean, these are like very core encounter building ideas, like finding objectives like protect the NPC, destroy this thing, hold this location. Like, you can probably look up like quest ideas or the basis of quests, and starting from these points, you can really flesh out more intricate encounters. Trevor, what have you got for us?
So right off the top of my head, one which I actually ran for Steely not too long ago was the party goes up to the top of a ziggurat where there's a whole bunch of monsters, and they go to fight the monsters. But at the same time, some of the monsters have in their possession a whole bunch of captured fellow adventurers. So the party basically broke up into this system of they fight the monsters, but at the same time try and free some more people, which was good because as they freed some people, more of the PCs got killed, and it was a rotating cast of characters, which was absolutely hilarious. Right there, dual objectives. I love those things. But my most favorite is the party going up to fight a bad guy or a set of bad guys. And midway through the fight, maybe even after a round or two, the real villain shows up. And then you have that thing of, hey, we were just trading blows. Let's go fight that person instead. I love that because I love the drain of resources and then having that thing of, hey, the enemy of my enemy kind of thing. I've definitely pulled that off a few times, and it's always fantastic, because then after you team up and beat the bad guys, if both parties are still alive, then it's a thing of like, okay, so where does that put us at now? And depending on the circumstance, that can be really, you could just go dial back into combat again, or it could be hey, let's cool off here.
Yeah, it really leaves you with an awkward social situation if both parties get out of that.
That's a good one.
On a similar note to that, like, say you're fighting like an enemy villain, and something else that could make it awkward or change the tone of the fight is like, say, one of them wears a signet ring that matches the symbol of the family of one of the player characters. And it's like, okay, we need what is going on here? We need to keep them alive now and question this.
You didn't tell us your uncle's in a cult. What's going on?
I didn't recognize him with the mask on. The encounter that I have, and I've talked about this a little bit on Trevor's channel as well, was one that was inspired by one of Wally DM's puzzles. My players were their objective was to find an individual who was hiding out in a library, but also find a way to stop these will-o'-the-wisps that were constantly spawning in the library. So they found out that there were some suspicious books that had been smuggled into the library. They had to find them. And once they did, they found that there was a specific order that these 5 books needed to be opened in. So not only were they fighting off these ghosts, they had to figure out this puzzle and make sure that this NPC stayed alive. And then I ramped up the encounter by if they failed that puzzle, the will-o'-wisps turned into proper CR for ghosts, so it made the combat harder, and they just had to kind of balance everything that was going on.
I love the evolving monsters aspect too, of like, hey, you are rewarded for beating them down quick, but you are punished for, doing the wrong thing. I love that like huge separation of like, okay, guys, don't mess up. And then if they do mess up, then it's like, oh, it's your fault.
Yeah. And they realize the severity of messing up. Yeah. That did result in some people getting aged. So that was a fun time.
Rest in peace, turtles. Tisk, tisk.
Thankfully, we had a few elvish folk on the team, so they were fine. Yeah. Well, hopefully for the folks out there that these ideas help spark some of your own encounter ideas. And if you have created encounters with a secondary objective or a twist that comes around, leave a comment below, and we'd love to hear your stories. Also, be sure to check out these people on their channels. These are some lovely folks with great DM and player ideas. So until next time, I will be back again to speak with you soon. Bye-bye. This episode of the Speak Dicely podcast was produced and edited by myself, Teni Brant, and the intro and outro music were created by Teni Brant. Thank you for the support, and we'll see you next time on the Speak Dicely podcast.